Yogananda loved to tell a story that's indicative of how things go in this world, and it's about the sea frog. So there was this frog who lived by the sea, and he would swim in the vast ocean, play in the waves, and then come out and haul himself out and sun himself on the sand in this vast, expansive, sunny, open area. And one day he heard chirpings or croakings from some of his brother frogs that were nearby and in a well. So he said, oh, let me go see what they're doing. So he hopped over to the well and he looked down in there and he saw this small well covered with frogs. They were jumping around and pushing each other and hopping about. And they called up to him and said, oh, yo, homeless, derelict frog up there. What are you doing? Come down, join our home. We have a wonderful society here. You can come down and be part of that. And the sea frog just looked down and said, nay, I don't think so. And so he hopped back to the beach and started enjoying his sunshine again and swimming in the sea. And then he thought, oh, my poor brother frogs stuck in that little well. Maybe I can help them. So he hopped back over, and this time he hopped in, landing on the back of some of the frogs, and the king well frog came swimming over on the backs of some of his slave frogs and said, what are you doing? Why do you come down here? Welcome. And the sea frog said, well, I've come to tell you of a different reality of where I live. He said, do you live? Where do you live? Do you live in a well? How big is your well? He said, no, it's much, much bigger than this one. Much bigger? How big is it? And he jumped a foot. Is it that big? Is it 1 foot across? He said, nay, it's much bigger. And he jumped 2 feet. He said, is that big? He said, nay, it's much bigger than that. Then he jumped all the way halfway across the well. He said, is it that big? And the sea frog said, no, I'm sorry, it's much, much bigger. And the other frog puffed up and was starting to get angry and looking around and making himself bigger. How can it be bigger than this? And he jumped all the way across the well. He said, is it that big? And the sea frog just laughed again. He said, no, it's much, much bigger. It's sextillion times bigger than this well. And the well frog just sort of looked at him and couldn't believe him and got very angry and started swimming about and churning up all his brothers and his slave frogs and his society frogs, and he couldn't believe it. And the other one persisted, and he said, let me tell you about this. And for several hours, they had this conversation about what it was like, the well that the sea frog lived in. And finally, he prevailed, and the king frog jumped out of the well and looked around, and behold, he was on the beach in the vast ocean, where he wasn't on top of all the other frogs. It was just a oneness and openness. And the story shows that someone has to lead us out of our little well of delusion, that it's not always easy to find a way to see out beyond that. And we're really fortunate at this time in the ages that there's more and more information out there and more channels for the divine that are telling us to wake up, to giving us a glimpse of what it's like in these other places.